Let's get into the pivot, all right? Transitioning from just a independent business owner to a franchisor. So we have these up here, we call it the 6 pillars of franchising, the things that are really important to become a successful franchisor. When you hear the term franchise development, that's kind of all things that have to do with marketing, finding, awarding franchise sales, okay? So it sounds like it's after they're a franchise, but it's not. It's the development part of finding, awarding, and then the training process starts. Marketing, remember, you're now going to be developing marketing on both ends now, right? Marketing to find good qualified franchisees, and then also marketing to help your franchisees bring in customers. Because you now are able to impact your royalties, right? The more you help them drive revenue, that's royalty coming back to you on every gross dollar of sales they have. Customer service is really important, right? First of all, you need to look at the franchisees as customers as well. Even though they're your business partner for 10 years, they're also customers because you're providing lots of services to them for that royalty. But also now, how do you continue to get information back from how the customers feel about the services that your franchisees are providing? We call it the customer voice. So you need to put some things in place to make sure you're hearing what kind of service your franchisees are providing out there. Operations, that's all things after they're a franchisee. From initial training, ongoing training, anything that helps them run their business better in the field, and you keeping them compliant and making sure they're running things properly. The business office is everything that's happening on the back end. So from franchise agreements that are sold, item 23s that they verified they were disclosed, and any other communications that happen after that, to and from franchisees, HR, you name it. That's one of the most important things. So talk about stories. I told you I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I go back to 1984, folks, all right? The internet had been invented, but nobody was using it yet. So everything was being done manually. We were selling franchises like crazy in California. We had 3 offices. One of them that had failed went and found an ambulance chaser attorney, didn't have an office, and worked out of his home office. There was even home offices way back then by an attorney. And it turned into a huge lawsuit. He found a few other disgruntled franchisees that had failed. And if we had kept better documentation, it would have never gotten to a lawsuit. It ended up, this was right when attorneys were finding out they could use RICO laws, which to go after gangsters for racketeering laws, could be used in other types of lawsuits. If you sent something through the federal mail, we can use RICO laws, which is triple damages if they win, right? I ended up, of course, we all knew we had no liability. We didn't do anything wrong, but we couldn't prove it. We didn't have good documentation. And we're not going to just, and the attorney thought we were just going to pay him off because he was on a contingency, right? They didn't pay him a dime. They're going to split it like 60-40. So we can't let this guy do this. He'll go to the other states and do it as well. So we're going to fight this guy. 2.5 years and $200-some thousand out of my pocket later, and sitting through about 15 depositions. We were in front of a 12-person jury. Let me tell you, that was terrifying. We won, but it's one of those very expensive educations that I said, I will never go through this again. Now it is much easier, of course, to keep great documentation with all the technology we have, but it's very important to make sure you keep good documentation. All right, culture. This is really important, okay? You now have some type of culture in your office that has something to do with the success of your business. You have to make sure you're imparting that to these franchisees. When you get back to awarding franchises, making sure you feel this franchisee gets your culture and can hire and train and support that culture with their employees in the field. So it's very, very important. It gives your brand stability, guides behavior. It's a sense of identity, and it sets your organizational boundaries, right? It's the most precious thing you have. So now you're a different kind of a leader, right? I'm not sure what kind of a leader you are in your organization, but now you're a leader of an ongoing organization with multiple offices out there, and you're trying to energize and motivate other business owners. Way different role than it used to be, right? So you've got your values, you have to speak them, your staff has to speak them, they have to speak these values to your franchisees, everybody has to get it. You know what your future you want it to be, whether I want 20 franchisees or 220 franchisees. You've got to speak what the future is going to be, because these franchisees came to you for a reason. They want to be on board with you. And you'll hear me talk later, most of them have never owned a business before. Franchising gives them the opportunity to escape the corporate culture to buy their first business. You're giving them that confidence in an already proven system. So they've never owned and run a business before, most of them. So, again, no longer just an independent business. You are setting up brand standards, and you want every franchisee to look and run pretty much the same way. You may allow, if you're brick and mortar, you may allow some differences based on the region of the country they're in. I remember I was living in California when McDonald's finally allowed people to break away from that traditional, looking building to sandstone on the outside, because it was kind of regional. So, now your focus is going to start shifting. It's not abrupt, but it's going to start shifting from just running your business to finding, awarding, training, and supporting franchisees. That's a big shift, right? Because now your money and your growth is going to be tied to these franchisees out there. Now, it is not an abrupt change. It's very slow, right? We were talking earlier about the reason they're here is because they've had customers ask them if they're a franchise or you should franchise. Your first franchisees are usually someone you know, family member, employee, customer, right? Because they know you, they believe in you, they believe in the product. Strangers are going to be hesitant in the beginning. They don't know who you are. So they want to talk to a happy franchisee. Right? You don't have those. So the sooner you have happy franchisees up and running, now things start to move along. The consultants are more willing to send them their candidate that has plenty of money, and they're going to help them buy something, and they're going to get a commission. They'll feel more comfortable sending their candidates to you once you have a happy franchisee that their candidate can speak with. So you have to start thinking of your daily activities, who's going to start taking some of that over from you. So now, right, you're a boss right now in your business, right? Employees do what you say or else. You can't do that with a franchisee. They're a business partner, right? They're not your employee. So now it's about coaching, mentoring. Franchising is a game of influence, folks. You're influencing them to do things the way you want them to do. Yeah, you got a contract and an operations manual that get to the or else part, but that's the whole point. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to be helped to do the things that they know will work for their business. You're building a business of business partners. So, a happy franchisee, what are they really looking for? And this goes for any of us here in the room, right? Perceived control. They feel like they have some control of their future and what they're doing. They perceive that they're making progress, that they see the brand is making progress. They come to you because they want to be a team player, right? If anybody comes to you that you know is a maverick, you do not award them a franchise, folks. You want team players. That's why they're coming to you. And they have a sense of purpose in pursuit of what their vision is that you're helping them get to. So your goal is going to be, okay, I need to get enough franchisees up and running, enough royalties coming in that now I'm at break even. It's covering my office expenses, the franchisor expenses. And as I said, but one that first franchise can take time. But any questions about what I just went over?
So what is an average amount of franchises you need to cover your office expense? Is that 3?
That varies greatly. It depends on the model, the brand, okay? I mean, there are some kind of ballpark standards that are out there, but first of all, we have to decide what's your royalty going to be, right? So what's the average revenue of a franchisee going to be after year 1, after year 2, after year 3? Royalty is going to be somewhere between 5 and 10%, depending on your model. You're a service model, so it's probably going to be 7 or 8%, right? Okay, so 7 or 8% on what do we think they're going to be doing, right? So you're estimating what those royalties are going to be to cover your expenses.
Where can I go find what other FDDs are?
Yes. So what I didn't mention, so after you sign up with us, during the launch call, we will have gone out and found competitors of yours' legal documents. So there's 4 states that if a company is franchising in their state, they make their FDDs available. So we'll go get your competition's FDDs, we're going to put them on a spreadsheet for you, and we're going to show you what they're doing. You're going to get their FDDs. So you're going to see what they're charging for a franchise fee, brand fee, marketing fee, technology fee. What does a territory look like for them for a franchisee? So you're going to see competitors' information, even the table of contents of their operations manual. Right? Just table of contents. So you're going to get a lot of information. That helps us, it helps you, and it helps the attorneys make some decisions about your brand and your model. Any other questions? Who likes money? I thought most people's hands would go up. Well, your franchise candidates are going to need money, right? And we have someone here that is really good at getting money for your franchisees to buy franchises with. Ralph, come on up.
Appreciate that. Hey. So, Guidant Financial Group. I've been with them for just under 10 years, and we have helped over 30,000 businesses secure over $4 billion in funding, creating over 85,000 jobs. That sounds really, really nice, and it's wonderful to be able to say those kind of things. What does that mean to you? When you're starting to look at a franchise, what does it mean? Well, there are a few funding strategies that your franchisees and you as well can use to either start your franchise or for them to be able to purchase and get started with your franchise. So we're going to talk about some of these here today. The most popular one that we've seen is the rollover for business startups. We'll talk about debt financing, particularly SBA loans, term loans, and then we're not going to talk a lot about portfolio loans just because it's such a niche strategy. You've got to have quite a bit of money in a stock market portfolio outside of your retirement. But if you have somebody like that, we do have solutions for them. But more than anything, just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of each of these strategies, just so that you have an idea. And let's just clarify. No one expects you to be an expert in financing. I always say what you want to do is be able to talk about it for about 3 sentences, and that's it. Okay, because if you can hold the conversation for 3 sentences, that's just enough to say, you know what, we've reached the max of what I know. Let me introduce you to someone who can actually really help you and really answer your questions and tailor a financing program to you individually. And that's what my team does. By the way, Ralph Nilssen, I'm the head of sales and financing and biz dev and just about anything else at Guidant Financial. Couple things that you'll want to know about your candidates. And there's 4 key things. The first off is, what is their credit score? Here in the United States, if your FICO score is below about a 680, the amount of options available to you are very minimal. Right or wrong, it's just the way the game is played. So don't hate the person who's playing the game, hate somebody else. But understand, if your credit score is under 680, we're not going to get past go on most debt financing. Okay? Second, what is the liquidity? And I'm not going to lie, cash is king. So, find out what cash liquidity is. And by the way, a HELOC is not cash liquidity. That's debt. Credit cards are not cash liquidity. So find out what cash they have. And there is a very big difference between cash liquidity and retirement funds, because there's big differences in rules. So what would be a retirement fund? A 401k, an IRA, a Roth, a TSP. It goes on and on and on. What's a cash account? A brokerage account, savings account. And here's what I will tell you is that when you're trying to start a business, it is so important to have sufficient liquidity. By the way, I've never known a business to go out of business by having too much cash. It just doesn't happen. So we want to preserve our liquidity. And the final thing is we want to understand what the real estate portfolio is, because that is usually the source of most individuals' greatest assets And it's a place where we can also collateralize if the loan is large enough that it needs collateralization. So once you have kind of a brief overview, and what Rick and his team will talk to you about is when you are crafting and looking for franchisees, you're going to want some sort of minimum cash requirements. All right, they're going to need to have a minimum liquidity, a minimum net worth, and you're going to set those things, and it's going to be very dependent upon what the investment is for your particular franchise. But these are the things to keep in mind, and some of the things that we would like to be able to understand before someone is sent to us, because we don't want to waste your time. And by the way, we prefer our time not to be wasted either. Because if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I've got a 570 credit score, I've got $5,000 in cash, and I've got $20,000 in retirement, I'm renting, and I don't have a job, move on. just move along. Okay. Maybe the greatest person in the world have the greatest heart, but we can't do anything at that point in time. So it's important to know these things. Let's talk about one of the most popular strategies there. And by the way, I will tell you that Rollover for Business Startup, or the acronym is ROBS, is not my acronym. That's not from my marketing department, okay? That was the IRS. And I always like to say that just goes to show that the IRS's marketing department is just about as good as their customer service department. Okay, it's bad, but what a ROBS allows you to do is invest up to 100% of your retirement assets in a small business, and you can do so without taking that 10% early withdrawal penalty, and you can do so without paying income taxes on the funds that because if I was to withdraw it, I'd be paying both. So how do we do that? Well, first off, why would you use it? And most people do it because they're coming up a little bit short on their equity injection, also known as your deposit. There's no such thing as a zero down SBA loan. It doesn't exist. The government requires 10%, and most banks will require 20 to 30%. So you're coming up a little short on that deposit, great, we can pull it and come up with it. Perhaps they're a little bit light on what's called post-lending liquidity, which means after the loan is paid, do you still have cash? Because you can't have your business 100% financed, you've got to have some liquidity after the fact. They don't have time to wait for an SBA loan. How long does the SBA loan take? That can take 60, 90, 120. I've seen them take up to a year and a half if it takes forever on the build out of a place. It can take a long time, and maybe they don't have the patience, or let's just face it, they may not like debt. So if they don't like debt, ROBS is a great strategy for them. By the way, I make a much better door than window. These are the types of accounts that can be used. After a while, it kind of becomes alphabet soup. So the easiest way to explain it is, if it is an inherited IRA, if it is a Roth IRA, we can't do anything with those two. If the 401k is with their current employer, the chances are very small that they're going to be able to move that 401k amount into the business to invest in their business. So you've got to be a little careful with that. Otherwise, world is our oyster. We can basically make everything else work. When you think about a ROBS, I want you to think just about the principles of investing. So, if I have retirement funds and I want to buy stock in Home Depot, which is a publicly traded company, I can do that all day long, right? And what happens? In actuality, my retirement dollars are pulled out of my account and they are put into the checking account of Home Depot to use for any legitimate business purpose. What happens? Home Depot gives me stock, which is a piece of paper with value. Now, hopefully that stock goes up over time. And we can watch the little ticker go up and go down and go up and go down, and eventually we sell, and only when we sell do we realize the gain. And then what happens? The money goes back into our retirement account. There's been no taxes paid because it's all done in the wrapper of what's called a qualified account, or a pre-tax savings account. So with that, Back in the 80s, somebody much smarter than I said, well, wait a minute, if I can do that with a publicly traded company, why in the world can't I do that with a privately traded company? And that's where the concept of a ROBS was born. So what we do as a company is we set you up with a C corporation and a 401k. That 401k works just like any other 401k. If I want to defer into it, I can. If I want to put a little money away from retirement, I can. If as an employer I want to match, I can. But the very first thing that we are going to do is once we set up these two entities, is we are going to take the retirement funds and we are going to roll them into the new 401k plan. And because it's being rolled in, there's no taxable event taking place. We're just going from one pre-tax account to another. And we can do that with multiple accounts and combine them into the 401k. And we can do that with multiple individuals into the 401k. But now I've got a chunk of cash sitting in my new 401k plan, and I just do what we did in the previous example. I give the dollars to the C Corp in exchange for stock, which is just a piece of paper with a value. But what happens? Up to 100% of those retirement funds get dropped into that corporation. You've just invested in yourself. And you can use those for any legitimate business expense. That may be to get that FDD built. That may be to get a marketing department, to hire an attorney. Your franchisees will use it to pay the franchise fee. But it can be used for any legitimate business purpose. And the total cost, about $5,000 to do it. So if you're going to roll over $10,000, it's not worth it. If you're going to roll over $1 million, boy, it's worth it in spades. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it is a size that fits most. So just to give you an example, if I were to withdraw the funds, what would happen? Using a 300, this starts to get a little buzzy in my ear, so I apologize. That's why I'm kind of staying away. But if I have $300,000 in retirement funds, I take a 10% early withdrawal penalty if I'm under the age of 59 and a half. I have to pay federal income tax on that money that I withdrew. And God forbid I make more than the money that I just withdrew from that retirement fund. Now, Texas is great, we don't have any state tax, but even just getting eaten up on the early withdrawal fee and on the taxes, I'm getting a 40% haircut on what I can utilize. Whereas with the ROBS, I can use up to 100% of it. It's a powerful strategy when used correctly. And when done correctly, okay? This is using 1974 ERISA laws. We are working with the Department of Labor. We have done this transaction thousands of times, and we have been battle tested by the IRS. We've never lost, but we do understand what goes in and how to do it properly. So what are the benefits of it? This can be done in as little as 2 to 3 weeks. So there is a saying, it says time kills deals. You want something to be done fast, ROBS allows you to do it fast. What's the interest payment on a monthly basis? 0. There's no interest payment. Well, wait a minute, don't I have to pay it back? Well, kind of, because you've invested the money in your business. So what happens if you invest your retirement funds into a business that goes belly up? What happened to all those that invested in Enron? Ugh. Yeah, oops, sorry. Door, not window. Yeah, it was ugly, but the bleeding stopped at what they invested. It didn't continue into taking your home and your assets and all the other things that can come into play. So there is a limit of your liability. It can increase your buying power because all of a sudden you're having access to a pool of money that is usually not available. And if you think about it from a banking standpoint, I've got assets that are eligible and assets that are not eligible. And if I want to increase somebody's net worth, magically moving something that's not eligible into the eligible column is the quickest way to do it, and that's what ROBS allows you to do. Because for most loans, retirement funds are just not eligible because the largest amount you can take is $50,000 as a loan. So this far exceeds it. And again, there's no collateral, there's no credit score necessary. It is, if you have the funds and you want to do it, it is available to you. Does anybody have a question? And if, yeah.
Typically, how long is the rollover process when you want your ROBS?
If the client does what we say that to do, we can get it done 2 to 3 weeks. All right. Now there's some states like New Mexico that tend to take 2 months just to file a corporation. So I can't speed up the government no matter what I do, but it's typically very, very quick. Okay. We're going to talk debt financing. By the way, welcome to the whirlwind of financing in 15 minutes or less. Hang on, we're going to have some fun today. I got 10 left, okay. One of the great things about the SBA is that they publish on their website what the minimum requirements are, not what the actual requirements are that the banks utilize. So I can't tell you how many people have called me and said, hey Ralph, I've got a credit score of 645. The SBA says I can get an SBA loan if my credit score is 640 or above, because that's what's published on the SBA.org. I know. But just because that's the minimum requirement does not mean that is what the banks are going to do, because they also have this wonderful little caveat saying you've got to use prudent lending practices. And prudent, bank's interpretation is you've got to have a credit score of 680 or above, and if it's 680, that's going to be a tougher one. Higher the better. The equity injection, what does that mean? That means your cash down payment is going to be 10% minimum, but they will often go 20, 30%, depending on a lot of different factors.